Good evening. Welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. On the programme tonight, the Supreme Court comes down heavily on the government's vaccine policy, says it's arbitrary and an irrational policy. Several key questions are raised. Why are there different prices for different groups? How much has the government actually spent on vaccines? How does this compare with the cost of vaccines elsewhere? And does this vaccination policy genuinely protect the interests of millions across the country? Also on the show tonight, after the government decided to scrap the Class 12 board exams, placing the health of students first, in the context of COVID, there are dozens of questions now that students have on how they will be assessed and when they will come to know. Tonight, a very special guest, the Secretary of the CBSE, that's coming up later on the show. But first, let's bring you a couple of important details on the entire Supreme Court and their observations on the vaccination policy in India. The Supreme Court has said that it's time to revisit and review the vaccination policy. The policy of paid vaccination for the 18 to 44-year-old group was prima facie arbitrary and irrational. How is 35,000 crore rupees in terms of the budget for vaccine procurement actually being spent? Submit a comparison of prices of vaccines in India and their international prices. The Supreme Court asks states, will you provide vaccinations for free? Submit a roadmap of projected availability of vaccines till the 31st of December 2021. That's a key question because no one really knows, despite the claims, where these vaccines are going to come from. Submit in 2 weeks data on the percentage of the population vaccinated. Submit data on the centre's purchase history of COVID vaccines, and respond, this is critical, on preparedness if there is a third wave which affects children. A vaccination policy relying on digital portals cannot meet the targets because of a digital divide. The centre has said in counter that the judiciary must keep off policies, but the Supreme Court said that the courts cannot be silent spectators when the constitutional rights of citizens are infringed by executive policies. So these were a couple of key points mentioned over there. Let's just go straight across now to my panel that joins me. I'm joined by Professor Giridhar Babu. We are Professor of and Head of Life Course Epidemiology at PHFI in Bengaluru. Sanjeev Navangul, the Managing Director and CEO of Bharat Serums and Vaccines, also on an important day in which we've seen some changes in terms of the rules which allowed more vaccines to come into India. The question is, where are those vaccines? Sujata Rao, the former Secretary of Health in the Government of India, joins us, as does Asif Bhamla, the spokesperson of the BJP. Professor Babu, let me come to you first. What the Supreme Court has said today, is this not, the absolute truth, what people have known for a very long period of time, that you cannot have 2 or 3 different pricing schemes for vaccines? We are one country, and therefore, in order to vaccinate as many people, all citizens are equal. There needs to be one price that needs to be fixed by the centre.
Yes, Vishnu, thanks for having me on the show. So as of yesterday, nearly 4.8 crores of people have been vaccinated 2 doses. So from now on, to cover 2 billion doses by end of December, we need to have a clear vaccination policy. The policy has to clearly lay out the roadmap for which vaccines are we using, and also what is the strategy in terms of covering the vulnerable people. So in terms of both of these aspects, in terms of procuring the enough supplies, and also to how do you cover vulnerable from an equity perspective, both are important. When I say equity, it also means in terms of those who cannot register on their own, what's the strategy for ensuring that these vulnerables are brought within the ambit of vaccination? This will include most people who are not digital friendly, those people who do not have access to any kind of registration system. How do we bring them into the vaccination program's ambit?
Okay.
So plan for vulnerables is the most important thing, but for that also even supply constraints will have to be resolved.
Mr. Bhamla, let me come to you next. The amount of 35,000 crores is the budget for vaccine procurement in India, and yet there is no transparency on how the government intends to actually spend this. Why does it need the Supreme Court to spell out?
Can you ask me the question again, Vishnu?
So 35,000 crores is the budget for vaccine procurement. The Supreme Court wants to know how that's going to be spent. Why is there no transparency at all in how this is being spent?
No, obviously, now that the Supreme Court, which is the apex body, has asked, and I'm sure the government will prepare a dossier for the same. But having said that, you see, there are two different issues as far as vaccination is concerned. Initially, there was such a wrong misconception created about the vaccines and the vaccinations, that whether it is authentic or it's not authentic. And then again, there is a little element of hypocrisy if you see within the opposition, that they demanded that it should the vaccinations are centralized, and they criticized the authoritarian behavior, the dictatorship. The states did criticize about that, and saying that there should have been more freedom to the states, and there should have been more.
Sir, no state wanted to pay by themselves.
Let me come.
Mr. Bhamla, I'm sorry, sir, you're wrong. No state wanted to pay by themselves.
Vishnu, when the central government tweaked the policy of vaccination to ensure that the states could decide on the vaccination policies, then now this whole issue is coming back. I don't disagree with what, of course, the courts have asked a very responsible.
All right, so let me just try and get in a few more reactions also on some of the specifics over here. Ms. Rao, the bottom line is this: the provision of vaccinations free for all citizens. Do you believe that this is ethically the right thing to do in our country? All citizens are equal.
It's not just only ethical, Vishnu. It is a necessity, because, price has always been a big barrier to access. We know that, who can afford to pay, like Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh has written a letter to the Prime Minister, saying that the vaccine today in Vijayawada is being sold by the private sector for 2,000 to 2,500 rupees a dose. That's from a chief minister, it's not my data. Now, please tell me, who can afford to pay 2,000 rupees a dose? So what is happening, what is troubling me today is not that people like me or those who are well off, of course we can pay and we can certainly afford it. But what I see in the lines is the large number of poor people who are, domestic servants. Even if you take a school teacher earning 10,000 rupees, they are desperately going and standing in the line and buying this vaccine, because they don't know whether the vaccine will be really available to them free, and they want protection, because for them it's a livelihood issue. Right. They have to live. So, okay, you're forcing the poor people today to spend money, and this is happening. And then the government is in a la-la land thinking CSR will come in and people will help. That's okay. Charity is being done. We saw yesterday.
But the numbers that we have in our country cannot be covered by charity.
They were giving food and somebody was giving.
Sure, ma'am, just one moment. I want to go across to Mr. Navangol. Mr. Navangol, one of the points mentioned by the Supreme Court is submit a roadmap of projected availability of vaccines till the 31st of December 2021. Now, the government has actually, the health ministry has spelt out where they're going to be getting doses from. There are 9 vaccine manufacturers, 6 of whom have not yet been approved for use. We have only 3 in India approved for use. So it's June now. In the next 7 months, we have to approve 6 of them, and they have to then start manufacturing at this phenomenal rate, and then people will need to be administered the vaccines, right? It can happen simultaneously. But can you explain to me, sir, how realistically it is possible to manufacture these vaccines when so many vaccine manufacturers have not even been cleared in our country?
Yeah, I think that's a valid question that you ask. What we need to see is, what do we know for sure? What do we know for sure is that based on the information available and based on capacity expansion, we know that around 16 crore vaccines can be produced per month by Serum Institute and Bharat Biotech. Put together, let's say, even if we take 6 months, it comes to about somewhere around 96 to 100 crores. We know that Sputnik will come in this country, about 10 to 15 crore vaccines of Sputnik will come in. So that's about 115 of those. We also know that Zydus phase 3 trials are nearly over, so probably they might get approval and another 5 crores will come from there. So it's about 120 there. we also can assume that about 10 to 15 crore vaccines will be imported.
Right.
Yeah, because those now with the relaxation policy
Yes.
that has been issued by DCGI, we know about at least anywhere between 10 to 20. So we have a clear line of sight of about 140 crore roughly vaccines that can come into the country with 20 crore vaccines already given. So we have about 160 crore vaccine visibility. Of course, there could be hurdles in between.
And the requirement is how many in your estimate?
Sorry, I think it could be roughly around the same number with 5-10 crores here and there to what it looks like, 10 crores here. But the issue is different, that this will cover about 70 crore population or 60 to 70 crore population. 94 crores is the population above 18 in this country.
Correct.
Plus, we have to include children above the age of 12 also, because if it is getting approved in other countries, we have to assume that this will get approved too. So that's another about 18 crores.
So we are neither meeting the above 18 category, and of course children, it's just All India Institute today has started testing Bharat Biotech's Covaxin on children. We're a long way away from that, unless there's, unless we get certain vaccines in the West, for example, in large numbers, right?
So that's a tough one. That we need
so we will not have the numbers is the bottom line, right?
Yeah, we will have a gap. We will have a gap from it looks like at the moment from available data.
Okay. Professor Giridhar Babu, let's look at a couple of the other points which are mentioned over here. Submit in 2 weeks data on the percentage of the population vaccinated. The government has in fact been going on and on about the absolute number. That absolute number is very impressive if you look at 30 crores, 35 crores, whatever the number may be. But as a percentage, it's paltry. It's for full doses, 2 doses, it's less than 3.5%, right, at this stage, or close to 4%. Nowhere close to where we need to be. So therefore, when the Supreme Court says submit in 2 weeks data on the percentage of the population vaccinated, is there a chance that we'd finally get the truth that we are nowhere close right now to where we need to be?
Yes, Vishnu. I mean, if you look at the data, as of yesterday, according to the Government of India's briefing, persons covered with 2 doses is 4.48 crores. And with 1 dose, it's 17.12 crores. So by going by the numbers, let's assume 100 crore is what the number of people we need to cover by December, including probably 12 to 18 years. We clearly are off the mark. But at this stage, more than the numbers, Vishnu, what we need to clearly look out for is a policy. What do we do with the vulnerables first? Because let's assume the next wave will be in November, December. Before that, what will we achieve? Can we cover at least 2 doses for all the vulnerables? And can we then ensure at least 1 dose for all the other adult population? And if Pfizer and Moderna are available, can we vaccinate 12 to 18 years for whom already the available research suggests that we can give them? So then you have a clear strategy in terms of this is what I'm going to do. Once I cover 1 dose for most of the adult population, beyond December, I can also plan for the 2nd dose. But I will make sure that before the next wave, we are reducing the mortality, which is why we are doing vaccination, by following a particular strategy. This is one strategy. The government can come up with other strategies. So what I really look forward to is a clearly defined policy with the strategy, with the supply of vaccines, how it is going to be. But most importantly, Vishnu, we are forgetting that there might be newer variants of concern.
Correct.
So therefore, vaccine will have to be updated depending on these variants. So the best thing is to get the manufacturers come to India, work with our companies and set up manufacturing plants and be the real power India is known for, being the vaccine supplier for the entire world.
Yep. Mr. Rao, the big worry is that in as much as we've made it easier for companies to come in, so there will be no trial process which will be required now. They can come right in if they've been cleared by the FDA, the WHO, the Japanese, the British, the Canadians, etc., etc. The question is, why wasn't this decision taken earlier if it had to be given? We were always short of vaccines. We never had an abundance of vaccines sitting around, right? We had to buy vaccines. We never did. Then these people were told, sorry, you have to do these bridging trials over here. Then we will approve it. And then you can manufacture or you can import whatever it is. Now we've told them, please come. There are no bridging trials which are required, and no indemnity is required either, right? Why couldn't this decision have been taken earlier? Isn't that, I mean, how many lives have potentially been lost as a result?
You're absolutely right. And I can't find any argument that I could counter yours. They could have done this. But all I'll say is that, you know, we have been a bit conservative. Even during 2010 H1N1, the same Pfizer vaccine, we had refused their offer to supply to India because they insisted on the indemnity clause. And we were not comfortable giving that. So, you know, it could be a part of that continuation of that policy, and they also felt the same way. But today, they are quite desperate for the Pfizer vaccine, which has proved to be extremely efficacious. And therefore, and it's also, they have said that it can be stored in more reasonable temperatures. And therefore, it has now become a vaccine that is possibly useful to, you know, for India to adopt. But having said that, I'm not very uncomfortable because after all, they vaccinated a whole lot of Indians in US. You know, why do they want big trials? To see the genetic composition is very different of Indians as opposed to Americans or, you know, the Western countries.
But their trials have been inclusive.
It's
been genetically diverse, the trials, right?
Yes.
And it's been in several countries.
Correct. So, you know, I'm willing to say, I think, you know, I'll trust the scientists' judgment on that and let that be. But there are other concessions that they are asking for.
Right.
Firstly, Pfizer, unlike Moderna, is not willing to give technology transfer.
No.
Pfizer is also asking for, you know, that their batches of vaccines that they supply to the government should not be tested for quality by any of our laboratories.
Right. So there does, I agree, and ma'am, I'm interrupting you because I'm running short on time. There obviously does need to be some system of checks and balances, yes. But I think it's welcome. Sure. I think it's certainly welcome that these vaccines are coming in. I'd like to thank you for that. I want to move on now to the next big focus on this program tonight. So many children across the country are now asking what's going to happen as far as their assessment is concerned after the government very correctly decided to scrap the class 12 board exams this year. Why? Because of the COVID situation, prioritizing the safety of children. It is a laudable step, an exemplary step, but obviously there are questions which certainly need to be answered. I'll be joined in a few moments by the Secretary in the Government of India to the CBSE, where we've gone through a lot of questions. But before this is what we are learning in terms of what assessment might end up being. Option 1, assess students on performances in class 10, their class 11 final exams, class 12 internal exams. Option 2, assess on the basis of class 10 board exam results and the internal assessments in class 12. So a couple of options over here. What you will just see now is that within a period of 2 weeks, there will probably be clarity on just how students are going to be assessed. The decision of the government to scrap the class 12 board exams. It's a move which has been taken in the interests of the health and safety of millions of students in this country, but several questions obviously arise in the process of assessing students as they try and get into colleges. Will this be a fair process? And what exactly is the assessment process itself going forward? Joining us, perhaps somebody best placed to answer these questions, the Secretary of the CBSE, Mr. Anurag Tripathi. Thanks, Mr. Tripathi, very much for being with us. So, as you can imagine, there are so many children, so many parents really wanting answers, and I'm sure you'd agree that we need to put them out of their tension. So one of the questions most common is, what is the basis on which class 12 students will now be marked?
Yeah, thank you. सबसे पहले तो मैं आपको थैंक्स बोलूंगा और ऑनरेबल प्राइम मिनिस्टर, एजुकेशन मिनिस्टर एंड इंटायर हायर अप्स को मैं थैंक्स दूंगा जिन्होंने टाइमली डिसीजन लिया है. एंड कोरोना के समय में जब एक बच्चों के सामने खतरा था उनकी हेल्थ को लेकर के, सेफ्टी सिक्योरिटी को लेकर के, हम लोगों ने एग्जाम कैंसिल किया. आपके प्रश्न का सीधा मैं जवाब ये देता हूं कि बेसिकली 12th का क्राइटेरिया अभी डिसाइड नहीं हुआ है. इट विल टेक फ्यू डेज, तो थोड़े दिन बच्चों को इंतजार करना पड़ेगा. 10th का क्राइटेरिया हमने डिसाइड कर लिया था, पब्लिक डोमेन में सर्कुलेट कर दिया, वेबसाइट पर अपलोड कर दिया है. इसमें ऑलरेडी कमेटी बनी हुई है, 7-8 मेंबर्स की कमेटी है. बच्चों के प्री बोर्ड, मिड टर्म, यूनिट टेस्ट, इवन प्रीवियस परफॉर्मेंस के आधार पर हम बच्चों के रिजल्ट को सर्कुलेट करेंगे. जहां तक 12th की बात है, वो क्राइटेरिया अभी हमने फाइनल नहीं किया है, सर्कुलेट नहीं किया है. तो बच्चों से रिक्वेस्ट है कि किसी तरह की र्यूमर पर ध्यान नहीं दें, किसी तरह की एंजाइटी में नहीं रहें, कुछ दिन वेट करें. हम पब्लिक डोमेन में उस क्राइटेरिया को सर्कुलेट करेंगे, उस पर हम काम कर रहे हैं और स्पेशलिस्ट की हम राय लेने के बाद उस चीज को बच्चों के सामने लेकर के आएंगे।
So, Mr. Tripathi, would that be another week before the children know how they'll be assessed?
मैं डेज के बारे में कंफर्म आपको नहीं कर रहा हूं क्योंकि उसमें थोड़ा समय लग सकता है, तो इट मे बी टेंटेटिवली 2 weeks टाइम, बट अप्रोक्सीमेटली 2 weeks या उसके थोड़े दिन आगे पीछे हम निर्णय लेने की स्थिति में रहेंगे।
Okay, next question. Pre-boards are typically tougher exams. They're marked more strictly, which is a fact. It's always been done. You want kids to have a tougher exam earlier so that, you know, they do better in their boards. That's the logic. So do students stand to lose, or, you know, in that sense, and or get more weightage for the pre-boards?
देखिए, 12th के बारे में क्राइटेरिया अभी हमने सर्कुलेट नहीं किया है, तो इसलिए 12th के बारे में मैं कोई बात इस चैनल के माध्यम से अभी नहीं करना चाह रहा हूं। जो भी क्राइटेरिया सर्कुलेट होगा उसके बाद हम डिटेल में डिस्कस करेंगे। लेकिन अगर सेम आपका क्वेश्चन क्लास 10th पर मैं लेकर के जाऊं, तो क्लास 10th में हमने प्री बोर्ड, मिड टर्म, यूनिट टेस्ट, प्रीवियस परफॉर्मेंस, इन 3, 4, 5 इवन इंटरनल असेसमेंट को भी हम लोग लेकर के चल रहे हैं और एक कमेटी नॉमिनेट की गई है जो बच्चों के बेस्ट परफॉर्मेंस को बच्चों के बेटर में, उनके फायदे में, उनके फेवर में लेकर के आगे बढ़ेगी। तो मुझे लगता है कि इतने सारे ऑप्शंस बच्चों के पास हैं कि किसी बच्चे के साथ कोई इनजस्टिस नहीं होगा। आई एग्री, इट में भी किसी बच्चे को प्री बोर्ड में कम मार्क्स मिल गया हो, इट में भी इंटरनल में कम मिला हो, इट में भी यूनिट टेस्ट में कम मिला हो, इट में भी उसके बाकी जो बोर्ड प्री बोर्ड एग्जाम्स होते हैं उसमें कम मिला हो। बट क्राइटेरिया इतना ब्रॉड है, इतना बृहद है, ऑप्शंस इतने ज्यादा हैं और जो कमेटी वो स्कूल पर है, स्कूल का प्रिंसिपल कमेटी को चेयर कर रहे हैं, उनके स्कूल के टीचर्स अवेलेबल हैं, दूसरे स्कूल के टीचर भी अवेलेबल हैं, तो कमेटी को भी अथॉरिटी दी गई है कि एक ऑब्जेक्टिव तरीके से बच्चों के मार्क्स को प्रपोज करें जिससे किसी बच्चे का नुकसान नहीं हो। तो ड्यूरिंग कोविड टाइम जो बेस्ट पॉसिबल हो सकता है वो हम करने का प्रयास कर रहे हैं। फिर भी हमारे रिजल्ट से अगर किसी बच्चे को कोई आपत्ति होती है, किसी को किसी तरह की लगता है कि उसके साथ इनजस्टिस हुआ है, तो आफ्टर दैट रिजल्ट निकालने के बाद कोविड की स्थिति जब नॉर्मल होगी तो हम उसका इंडिविजुअल या उसका एक स्पेशल एग्जाम भी ले सकेंगे। तो दोनों रास्ते हमने खुले रखे हैं।
So when will the CBSE declare results? Because you know, university admissions, competitive exams, those who have the opportunity to study abroad, there's a deadline. So how soon would you want to?
देखिए, अगर आप टेंटेटिव टाइम लेकर के चलें तो कंट्री के जो हमारी यूनिवर्सिटीज हैं, जो कॉलेजेज हैं, अगस्त में नॉर्मली उनकी प्रोसेस स्टार्ट होती है और सारी चीजें नॉर्मल रहती है। तो अगस्त में उनकी प्रोसेस स्टार्ट होती। फॉरेन इंस्टीट्यूट्स में भी अगर आप देखें, डिफरेंट स्कूलों से बच्चों से बात करें तो फॉरेन स्कूल्स के भी जो ऑफर बच्चों के लिए आ रहे हैं वो अगस्त की बात कर रहे हैं। तो एश्योर करना चाहेंगे ये प्रोसेस हायर इंस्टीट्यूट्स की, यूनिवर्सिटीज की, कॉलेजेस की, फॉरेन इंस्टीट्यूट्स की प्रोसेस स्टार्ट होने के पहले हमारी मार्कशीट बच्चों के हाथ में होगी, हमारा रिजल्ट पेरेंट्स और बच्चों के पास होगा, तो बच्चों को किसी तरह का नुकसान नहीं होगा। और अब मेरे पास समय भी अब हम लोगों के पास आ गया, इंटायर जून जुलाई हमारे पास अवेलेबल है, तो विद इन टाइम हम बच्चों को रिजल्ट देंगे और किसी तरह का नुकसान हमारे रिजल्ट के कारण बच्चों का नहीं होगा।
You know, Mr. Tripathi, what happened the last time around, again because of COVID, when you were unable to hold CBSE or ICSE board exams and relied on an internal system of evaluation partially, was that there was an inflated system of grades, which in any case, as you know, it's a larger issue. The number of students scoring above 95% is huge. That time around, in the top colleges, anything short of 100% in certain courses or 99.75 in certain courses, right, admission was not possible. But the number of students who actually scored very close to that, at 97%, 95% and above, was at a record high. So again the question is this, is there not the other fear that this system will encourage a massive exaggeration or escalation of grades which make it very difficult for colleges and for students who are otherwise good students?
देखिए, मैं यही कहना चाहूंगा कि जो असेसमेंट का हमारा क्राइटेरिया होगा और जो हम रिजल्ट निकालेंगे उनमें इन सारी चीजों का ध्यान रखा जाएगा कि जिससे किसी भी तरह की ऐसी स्थिति नहीं आए कि किसी बच्चे को जिसका परफॉर्मेंस कम है उसको ज्यादा नंबर मिल रहा है और जिसकी परफॉर्मेंस अच्छी उसको कम मिल रहा है। क्राइटेरिया इतना ऑब्जेक्टिव है कि बच्चों को हम जो भी उनकी एक्चुअल परफॉर्मेंस है उसके आसपास बच्चों को मार्क्स मिलेगा। एंड सेकेंडली एग्जाम का ऑप्शन हमने रखा है कि अगर कोई डिससेटिस्फाई होता है तो ऑप्शन भी उसको मिलेगा। जहां तक प्रश्न ये है कि बच्चों को मोर देन 95, मोर देन 97, मोर देन 98% मार्क्स मिलते हैं, मेरा उत्तर आपके चैनल के माध्यम से यही है कि जिस कंट्री में 35 लाख बच्चे 10th एंड 12th बोर्ड का एग्जाम दे रहे हो, वहां कुछ बच्चे तो होंगे जो 100 में 100 लाएंगे, जो 99 लाएंगे, 98 लेके आएंगे। तो ये
The question is that I wish we had colleges which, of the same standing which could accommodate these brilliant students.
Yes.
That's where the problem is, not them scoring 100.
I'm just coming up. I'm just coming the answer. I'm saying कि कुछ बच्चे तो, और हमारा क्राइटेरिया जब हम 100 मार्क्स रखे तो हम क्यों मान के चलेंगे किसी को 100 नहीं मिलेगा? ये हमारा क्वेश्चन पेपर इतना ऑब्जेक्टिव तरीके से है कि बच्चे अगर मॉडल आंसर के आसपास होते तो उनको फुल मार्क्स मिलते हैं। एंड दिस इज अ गुड थिंग कि अगर बच्चा अपना बेस्ट परफॉर्म कर रहा है तो फुल मार्क्स मिल रहा है।
There will be lots of students who will say they want to take the exam again. So therefore it goes down to the examination venue, safety of students there, distancing of students there, wearing a mask always to take that exam. Where will these exams be held? In the parent school or in exam centers? How will that work?
सबसे पहले तो मैं आपके रेस्पेक्टिव चैनल के माध्यम से ये रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा पेरेंट्स से, बच्चों से, टीचर से, कि पहले वो इंतजार करें, वेट करें, भरोसा करें कि हमारा रिजल्ट परफेक्ट होगा और वो सेटिस्फाई होंगे। रेयरेस्ट ऑफ द रेयर ऐसा होगा जब बच्चे कहेंगे कि नहीं, हम डिससेटिस्फाई हैं और हम परीक्षा देंगे। हमने ऑलरेडी क्लियर किया और आज हम फिर क्लियर कर रहे हैं आपके चैनल के माध्यम से, इन केस ऑफ इमरजेंसी, इन केस ऑफ एक्सेप्शनल सर्कमस्टेंसेज, अगर हम वो परीक्षा बच्चों के लिए लेते हैं जो वो चैलेंज करते हैं, वो हम तभी करेंगे जब सिचुएशन कोविड की बिल्कुल नॉर्मल होगी, जब हमें गवर्नमेंट से परमिशन मिलेगी, जब हेल्थ मिनिस्ट्री और बाकी सारी मिनिस्ट्रीज हमें एनओसी देंगे कि हाँ सारी चीजें ठीक है और हो सकता है, क्योंकि तब तक हम वो कंडक्ट नहीं कर सकते। तो उस समय जो सिचुएशन होगी, जब वो बच्चों के फेवर में होगी, कोविड की सिचुएशन बिल्कुल नॉर्मल होगी, किसी तरह का खतरा नहीं होगा, तो सारे प्रिकॉशन लेते हुए हम करेंगे। बट हम अभी उस सिचुएशन पर डिस्कस ना करें तो बेटर है, एंटीसिपेट ना करें तो बेटर है, क्योंकि इससे अननेसेसरी की एंजाइटी बच्चों के मन में जाएगी। अभी आप यही मोटिवेट करें बच्चों को, और मैं भी बच्चों को यही सलाह दूंगा कि हम जो भी रिजल्ट देंगे वो बेस्ट वे में होगा और नॉर्मली आपके साथ होगा, किसी तरह की दिक्कत नहीं होगी। एक्सेप्शनल कंडीशन अगर होगी तो उसका समय उस समय के लिए हम छोड़ देते हैं।
All right, Mr. Tripathi, lots of questions there. Thank you so much for taking all of these questions and reassuring students who've been waiting really for these answers. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us.
Thank you.